All right, welcome everybody to this week's broadcast. I am really excited because we have a special guest. I think everyone here knows Courtenay Turner already. Just a few days ago, Courtenay sent me her newest essay on Operation Phoenix, which tied together a bunch of elements that are shaping today's world in a very, very bad, or at least moving us in a very bad direction, which often are treated as separate things. You know, the rise of this eschatological, fanatical, pseudo-Christian Zionist thing, which is fixated about this idea of creating a clash of Gog and Magog to fulfill some idea of prophecy to burn the world and bring in a new age, while at the same time you've got this strange transhumanist thing, which has a very, very disturbing relationship with what I just mentioned, and and a lot of sick ideas just in general. That if we're not aware of how this category of ideas has done so much damage to human history, and also in doing this exercise, in also recognizing where have been the weak kinks in the armor of the empire, because human beings, being smarter than many of those active political figures in today's world, in the past, have been able to maneuver creatively against the type of traps that have been set by this occult agency, which has been trying to push us into playing the role of our own executioner periodically throughout all of history. That's been the dominant theme, is a feudalistic, fanatical, occult agency which has wanted to keep populations as dumb, as depopulated, as forever warring with their neighbors as humanly possible forever. That's not a new thing. It's just that the coloration, and again, this is what I really appreciate about Courtney's essay, which will be linked in the description box, is that her essay was very comprehensive, and it did tie all of these disparate pieces together with a lot of the key players who are active in pushing this phoenixing operation in our present day. And just one thing before I give it over to Courtney. We just came back, Cynthia and I, from Calgary. We presented a little seminar as well, and in the course of doing the research just before the seminar, I picked up on something of interest that may play into some of the conversation that we have when Courtney's formal remarks are finished. And I'm just going to show a picture here of something that surprised me. I guess it didn't totally surprise me, but it's surprising. Um, can people see two creepy creatures on the screen? Yeah. Okay. So on the left is Gog, and on the right is Magog, are the names of these two giants. These two giants are known as the protectors of the city of London. Once a year, Gog and Magog, these big effigies of these giants, are brought out in a parade that people can watch on YouTube. And it's weird. People normalize something that should not be normalized at all. And on the shield of, I don't know if that's Gog or Magog, whatever. On the shield, one might notice a particular image of a phoenix emerging out of fire. And that, when I did a little bit of a Wikipedia search, I was surprised to discover that actually indicates a celebration of sorts in 1666, when the London fire had been completed over 4 days of ravaging the city of London, and a new empire that was centered around the restoration of the Stuarts, that some believe to be the direct heirs of the Merovingian bloodline of Jesus and Mary Magdalene through the ages. That Stuart dynasty was restored after the English Civil War, and a new sort of reset had happened, which consolidated or set the stage for the later Glorious Revolution and the Venetian takeover of England in 1688, just a few years later. So, I mean, this sort of imagery colors our history. It's everywhere. And, for people, I think a lot of people might have seen also Cynthia's recent documentary on Brett Weinstein's Call to Phoenix the Republic, which Courtney has also written about. And I think that it's very, very useful to appreciate what this Rosicrucian thing is, and then again to sort of see what is it afraid of. So, Courtney, thank you so much for taking the time. Courtney also, before we started this broadcast, pointed out that she woke up with a fever and a bit of a flu. So she's soldiering it out there, and I appreciate that so much. And after you're done your formal remarks, like usual, we'll open up for a dialogue with the audience. I'm sure people will have questions. I'm so happy that Donut's here also to participate. I'd love to get your thoughts on what Courtney's going to say. But Courtney, it's all yours. Blow our minds now. Go.
Well, thank you for all of that. That fantastic introduction. And yeah, this imagery of the phoenix, right? So that is why I call this the Phoenix Conspiracy. And I will just before we start point out that I really see these movements as converging, coalescing. I don't know that necessarily like there's a, that they're all in on some sort of a grand conspiracy. I do think that the ideas themselves converge to the same, they have the same telos, the same shared end goals of this phoenixing the republic and then arising from the ashes, this like techno-feudal kind of world. So, and what I've tried to outline in this, which was pretty comprehensive, but obviously it leaves things out. I don't go to like the ultimate puppet masters because that would be a whole separate probably book. And actually, Matt and Cynthia have both addressed both of them in their books. So this audience, I'm sure, is very aware of really that grand architecture and the master puppet master. So in this one, I point to Peter Thiel as one of the puppet masters, but he's just a billionaire. So obviously he's not running the entire show. He's not a trillionaire. So I just want to caveat a couple of those things. But the phoenix symbol for the Rosicrucian is this, alchemical kind of concept of what is it, a coagula el salva. So it's this idea of, and I have it right here where I just lost it. I'm wondering if I'm mispronouncing it. But it's essentially this idea of burning down, and you have this destruction before you have the rebirth. And I'm just looking for, I had exactly that. Right. Okay. So solve a coagula, which is dissolve and then coagulate. So essentially, the destruction and then the rebirth. And this is a hermetic, alchemical, and then of course the Rosicrucians ran with it. In this article, I go through all of the, maybe not all, but this goes all the way back to the Egyptians and their reference to Ra, the sun god, in Western esotericism, in Christianity, the Eastern traditions. It was, I'm going to mispronounce this, the Feng Guang uh, bird, and it was also tied to renewal through sacrifice. So we see this concept over and over again. And so Brett Weinstein had done his in the Rescue the Republic event. He had ended his speech with talking about how he brought up the famous question, and then Ben Franklin's famous response, like, what type of a government is this? And he says, a republic, if you can keep it. And Brett Weinstein says that this is a republic if we can phoenix it. Now, I have seen he was actually involved a year prior in 2023 in this INC 23, which is the Independent National Convention. And he was one of the keynote speakers. The rumor is that it was the title of the keynote speech, which I was not there and I cannot find any record of it. So I don't know for sure. But the rumor is that the title of that speech was Self-Governance and the Phoenixing of the Republic. But on the website, it talks about independence, rising above the ashes of the failing system, tired of watching the same old political divisions tear our country apart. Have you grown weary of manipulative partisan talking points and political posturing? So, and then when they go a little below, they talk a lot about this, the trans-partisan movement. So I outlined this. I completely forgot about it. So I had added it a little bit later in this article. But there is an Operation Phoenix that is going on right now, underway. And Brett Weinstein was involved in this recent INC at the 2024 INC. They had mentioned him as, like one of their, biggest players, although he didn't end up going to that particular one. He wasn't speaking at, he did speak at 2023. But they talk about this transpartisan movement, and they're working right now on something called Operation Phoenix. So I'll just briefly mention it right now, but we can go more into it a little bit later. But it's the shadowy blueprint for infiltrating Congress with independents in 2026. So I personally have been noticing this movement in the what I call the indie sphere. A lot of people talking about the two-party illusion, the duopoly here in the United States, and of course, we know there's problems with the two-party system, the whole tagline of the uniparty. George Washington, one of our first president, warned against the two-party system, and he didn't use the term Hegelian dialectic, but he essentially said it would be a loophole for foreign entanglements and enemies, foreign and domestic, to infiltrate through, which I think we're very much seeing today. But what they're doing is preying on, in typical Hegelian dialectical fashion, they're preying on the fact that people are aware that there is some sort of a co-option going on, that there's corruption, and that there are flaws in this system. And they're using it to try and create a new movement, which I really think is much more akin to third way politics. And I did an article on the technological age of Aquarius, third way politics, and what was it, dystopian dreams. And I tied in game B to it because about the third attractor, which is very similar to third way. And I brought up Anthony Giddens, who wrote the book on third way, and he talks about the radical center. And this is exactly what we're now seeing with Elon Musk, who's talking about how we need a center party, quote unquote, third way dream or digital dystopia, sorry, post-partisan movements. So we're really seeing this kind of come to the forefront right now. And that's why I thought it was so important to address this. And actually this movement with the United Independents, which is Christopher Life, is the founder of United Independents. And he actually did a convention in 2024 in Denver. And one of the founders of that convention who helped him organize it was Brock Pierce. So those who are familiar with Brock Pierce know all of his scandals there, but he's very involved in this movement as well. And so we're seeing this really come to the forefront with this, independent movement that is preying on people who see a problem with the two-party system and trying to create a new, I would liken it to a third way, radical center beyond the two-party illusion, duopoly, whatever you want to call it. But as Anthony Giddens says, it's always left of center. The radical center is not radically center. It is always left of center. And Anthony Giddens says it's explicitly so for social and economic reasons in order to, create this third way movement. So I feel like that's very much what we're seeing. And I think what we're seeing is very much aligned with technocracy. And technocracy is inherently a very progressive movement, much more aligned with the far left. So he says it's third way is a renewed social democracy have to be left of center because social justice and emancipatory politics remain at its core. So this is very reminiscent of technocracy that talks about things like energy credits. All right, so energy credits in the current day are very similar to like the carbon credits. It's the same kind of idea. This leads us to where I think everything is going, which is a tokenized economy. So I will bring up, I had talked about a techno-feudal system, and I think that is very much what we're seeing. So we've got Yanis Varoufakis. Again, I don't know if I pronounced it correctly. He's an interesting character. I think he's really the one who coined this term, techno-feudalism, although it's very much what we're seeing. I think that's kind of the natural phrasing. But he's interesting because he's a communist, and I think his father was actually jailed for not denouncing communism, and his mother was a feminist. But he has coined this term techno-feudalism, and I'll just give you a couple of breakdowns, like key points as to what techno-feudalism is. And according to him, it's the rise of cloud capital. This is the central element of techno-feudalism, where digital platforms and networks are owned by the tech giants. So like Amazon, Google, Apple, Meta, they own this cloud capital. And then we have a shift from profit to rent. And he argues that these tech companies don't primarily generate profits from the production and the sale of goods, but instead they extract rent by controlling access to their platforms and network. And he says this is comparable to feudal lords extracting rent from serfs and who are working on their land. And then he uses cloudalists as feudal lords. The owners of these tech companies become the cloudalists, acting like feudal overlords who control digital fiefdom and exert unprecedented power over individuals and traditional businesses, turning them into digital serfs or vassal capitalists who depend on these platforms. And we see this now, right? This is largely predicated on the cybernetic algorithmic system that is built into these platforms. And I also did a pretty long piece. I called it the algorithmic oracle. And if you're interested in learning more about that, it's all about the Delphi method. And the argument that I make there is that the Delphi method really drew from sensitivity training and combined sensitivity training to what we see today, which is an algorithmic version of the Delphi method. So we're seeing it. I think the NATO cognitive warfare document, which I have several quotes of in that article, really exemplifies this, how they weaponize people's passions and emotions and really target them to create these feedback loops, these cybernetic feedback loops, so that people will be divided against each other, where we can create these Hegelian dialectics that are, poles just churning and spiraling towards the omega point. But they're doing this intentionally. And that document, I mean, there are many references, but that document, I think, is a really great distillation of exactly how that works. So then we've got behavior modification and control. Cloud capital isn't just about controlling access to products. It is about controlling and modifying behavior through algorithms and data analysis. These algorithms train us to like what the platforms offer, creating feedback loops that diminishes our agency and choice. And that's exactly what that article is all about, the algorithmic oracle. What else was I going to say about that? The algorithmic, yeah. So I lost my train of thought, but I'll remember. Beyond capitalism, he argues that the traditional pillars of capitalism, free markets, and the pursuit of profit are being replaced by the dominance of platforms and the extraction of rents, making it a fundamentally new system, not just a phase of capitalism. And he says that this is, of course, a threat to democracy and individual freedom. So behavior modification. I remember what I was going to say. There is a document. This is being taught actually at schools like all over the world. They have students who are getting degrees in this, but there's a white paper from 2023, and it's called The Internet of Behaviors. And that's exactly what this is about, the behavioral modification and control. So it's a study of how through the data that they collect, that they can use cybernetic feedback loops in order to program people's behavior. And we see this colloquially and just in our everyday engagement. We talk about something and then we get a social media either video or an ad that pops up and kind of over and over again, it's similar kinds of themes that push us to either adopt certain ideas or to buy certain things. And usually the buy certain things is how it's couched, right? We're just trying to get your preferences so that we can know what to sell you. So we'll sell you things that you actually want. That's usually how they phrase it. But this is really about modifying our behavior for I think for the techno-feudal society that they want to create, where we are going to be the consumers in this society. Threat to democracy and individual freedom. The shift, according to him, poses a significant threat to democracy, individual freedom, and even efforts to address critical issues like he's a fan of he's a proponent of the climate change issue. He says that the tech giants' immense power allows them to shape societies and exert influence on the global scale, blurring the lines between economic and political power. So, I definitely don't align with him on a lot of things, but I think he really nailed where this is all heading. And he thinks we're already there. That's already where we're at. I'm not quite that, So I'm not that fatalistic about it. I think that we still have time to turn this back, and I think people still do have individual agency, free will, and cognitive freedom. However, part of the reason I wrote that algorithmic oracle article is because I want people to understand that a lot of times what we think our ideas are actually being shaped and molded. That whole saying of like NPCs. Not that everyone is, but a lot of people are spewing things that they think are their ideas, but they really aren't. I had done an interview, and the one clip from that interview that they took of me was when I was talking about how people typically don't read much anymore. They don't spend a lot of time because we don't spend much time reading anymore. And we live in a soundbite society where, I know Twitter, you can now, get a blue check mark so you have 140 characters. But, just take the 140 character model. Most people are not reading more than that or even absorbing more than that. Now it's like an hour podcast is too long for people to consume. It's like the 30 seconds is where their attention span is at. And because of this, people don't have a lot of inner monologue. They don't do a lot of inner reflection, thinking. And yet so much of our identity is attached to that as a human. It's attached to our thought processes and our reflection on things and our intellectual synthesis of material. That's a huge part of how we form our own identity. And so as human beings, we crave this. But because a lot of people don't spend time doing this anymore, we now have a culture where you have these pop intellectuals, I call them, and they do a lot of very long-winded bloviating oftentimes. But I think the reason they're so popular is because it's very similar to entertainment, in the form of like film or television or theater, where you watch someone and you have a vicarious experience. Right. Oftentimes, somebody will go to the theater and it will allow them to have emotions that they wouldn't necessarily allow them to access, in their daily lives. Like, maybe a really macho guy who goes see a tearjerker and he starts, bawling, but you wouldn't do that, maybe even in front of his own family. But he allows himself to do that in that experience. And that's great. It's very cathartic. And that's part of why we enjoy, those mediums of entertainment. But I think what's happened with this pop intellectualism is that people now go and watch live podcasts and lectures and, more intellectual type of material, infotainment, if you will. And then they think that they have had that intellectual experience and they think they've done this really deep thought processes, but they haven't. It's been voyeuristic. And I think that that's a huge problem because now people internalize things that they think are their ideas, but they aren't really. And the feedback loops on and algorithms and social media and just the internet and that information itself play into that so largely, I think, by design. So that gives a little bit of a backdrop. And so I've been watching these various movements, and I really felt like there's kind of this Hegelian dialectic that's shaping up. So those of you who saw my presentation that I did last time on Game B know that that's something I've been really diving into, and I am very, very much concerned about. And I actually learned about it by doing research on Brett Weinstein. He's one of the co-founders of Game B. And he started, this was back in, I guess, 2011. There was, and now I've learned more about the story. So Jordan Hall, who's another co-founder of Game B, he met Jim Rutt through the Santa Fe Institute. They were both there. Jim Rutt was working on some like an evolutionary software. That's part of why he brought in these evolutionary biologists. And Jordan Hall was at the Santa Fe Institute as well. But prior to that, he went to this event. And I forgot the name of the guy who introduced him and insisted he went. But it was at the Perimeter Institute. And Eric Weinstein was giving a speech there. And Jordan Hall calls Eric Weinstein the rabbi of Game B. Although he hasn't been super involved in the, kind of ideas and shaping of Game B in that regard. He's, very much been the rabbi, the yenta, if you will, kind of putting people together. And he insisted that, so Jordan Hall met both Brett and Eric there, and Eric insisted that Brett and Jordan, get together and start brainstorming. And Jordan said it took a few times, but that eventually they did. And he was at the Stanton meetings, these Stanton meetings in Virginia that Jim Rutt was trying to launch. Again, this transpartisan, trans-political movement, and it was called the Emancipation Party. And it had a platform that was very similar to like a Bernie Sanders. You know, they wanted a universal basic income, universal health care. So they wanted all these reforms. And I have an outline I have the website linked in that article on the technological age of Aquarius as well. So if you're interested, you can go look at that. But so he introduced them. They start at this Stanton meeting where they're trying to launch this emancipation party that, of course, did not go over. It wasn't successful. And from there, they spun off this Game B. So it is Brett Weinstein. That was back in 2011. And I've also found, here's another little interesting piece, is that I suspected the intellectual dark web, which Brett Weinstein was one of the co-founders of, was a kind of an influence operation for Game B. And those words weren't specifically used. That's my term. But Andrew Cohen has an article on Manifest Nirvana. And he says that the intellectual dark web was a seeding ground to prepare the audience for the acquiescence of what would become Game B. So he essentially says that it was an influence operation for Game B. So I thought that was pretty interesting that, you know, he kind of spelled that out.
Who was this person who wrote the Manifest Nirvana?
Andrew Cohen.
Okay.
So Andrew Cohen is an integralist. So Kenneth Wilber. I think I have actually a picture of the Emancipation Party. I might be able to pull that up. But yeah, so he's a big proponent of Kenneth Wilber's work, the theory of integralism. And it's funny, it's kind of like a theory of everything, which is Eric Weinstein's, but they're very different ideas. Eric Weinstein's was the geometric unity concept and integral theory. Kenneth Wilber is the AQAL. His it's based on actually Claire Graves' spiral dynamics, and it's also based on Maslow hierarchy of needs, and it's called the altitudes of development, but it's these stages of consciousness that you go through. Teal is the ultimate, yeah. So,
no, that's useful. Just quick question. I'm not going to do this often, but have you encountered E.M. Burlingame as a commentator or influencer in our current day and age?
No.
Okay, it's something I'll bring this up later on. E.M. Burlingame, but he's sort of just appeared everywhere on the scene, highly influential, and he's also dropping phoenixing language into his discourse. And he's a direct follower also of the integralist theory and the entire Esalen Institute, Michael Murphy operation as a Green Beret who's gone into becoming like an influencer of influencers to shape sort of the kind of like Brett Weinstein. So it was just a question that popped into my mind as I was listening to you.
Okay, and he's a fan of integralism?
Yeah. He operates. He's written extensively about his the use of integralism to influence the new asymmetrical warfare after Iraq and Afghanistan would have to see a. Anyway, there's a whole other thing. Okay, I'll say something about this in the Q&A, but I just want to throw that in there. But go ahead, keep going.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Well, so Game B, and the way I think of Game B, so I started to see what looked to me kind of like this Hegelian dialectic between Game B and the Dark Enlightenment. Now, the Dark Enlightenment is operating through, I see it as like the right-hand path. It's very much operating through the, I make the joke, it may not be funny to some, so forgive me if this is not politically correct, but I like to joke that it doesn't matter if you have mommy issues or daddy issues, that, they're going to give you well, in this case, they're going to give you a gay Peter Thiel so you can have a mix of both. But really, they operate through this kind of left-hand, right-hand path, right? And so Game B, to me, is very much this left-hand left-leaning politically. It appeals more to the people who subscribe to the Gaia religion. It's all about sustainability. They're very much aligned with the UN. In fact, many of the Game B advocates are members of the Club of Rome, right? We've got Zach Stein, we've got Nora Bateson, the daughter of Gregory Bateson and Margaret Mead. So we have, direct links to that apparatus, and they're very much in favor. There's actually the what do they call them? The B Corps. That's what it is. B Corps is a they're different corporations under B Labs. And this is all about, they actually have an SDG adapter score. So it's all about like meeting your SDG metrics, and you get rated based on that. You can get your B certification. And this is not small. This is like 6,000 companies, and big companies like Patagonia, Ben & Jerry's is probably a really famous one. The Ben & Jerry's is pretty overt about how they are not a ice cream company. They are an activism organization that happens to sell ice cream. So this is a B Corp. So these things are already being adopted, and they're very much in line with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And that's, very much operating through what I consider to be the left-hand path. And then you have the Dark Enlightenment, which a lot more people seem to be aware of currently, because it's really surrounding, I would say, infiltrating the Trump administration. So it's kind of starting to come to the surface, and they tend to operate through the quote-unquote right-hand path. You have it's very patriarchal, it's very authoritarian. People like Curtis Yarvin are talking about creating a autocracy that is run. He calls it a SovCorp. Nick Land, his successor in the Dark Enlightenment, calls it GovCorp. So really having a dictatorship. He actually, Curtis Yarvin said, we need to get America's problem with their government. We need to reboot the government, and part of the problem is that Americans just need to get over their fear of dictatorship. So they're pretty overt about it, and that's so I've seen this kind of. It looks like a Hegelian dialectic kind of an operation, whether intentionally or, they're using it that way. And the synthesis seems to be network states. So the Dark Enlightenment, it is funny how much it's coming to the surface now, because the Dark Enlightenment, Curtis Yarvin's been writing since 2007. There was last month, I saw a very short clip from CNN where they were saying how there's this, blogger, he goes by Mencius Molebug, and he's been writing for over a decade, but now it's very concerning because he has a strong influence on the Trump administration. Like, he's been writing for almost 2 decades, but who's counting? Apparently not you. But he's a pretty interesting character, and a lot of people are finding him, I think rightfully so, pretty scary. He has had a huge influence on the Trump administration, certainly on people like Elon Musk, who now with his American party, I put that in air quotes because I don't think there's anything American about it, but his American party, he's actually consulted with Curtis Yarvin on how to start this new party. And also worth noting that one of his very first really major supporters was Andrew Yang of the Forward Party. Right? The Forward Party, their whole tagline is it's not left, it's not right, it's forward. Forward sounds pretty progressive to me, but that's their tagline, and they are also involved in this United Independent kind of consortium. So it seems to be a huge part of this third way type of movement. And before I go on, I will address a little bit of that, because I have this is from, let me see where the site is, and I think it's Rosa Corey who said it, but I'm not 100% sure. But she's talking about communitarianism and how it's third way. And she says, communitarianism, for those who are not familiar with the concept of communitarianism, it's kind of this building a balance between the individual and the community. And I think communitarianism, in here, she actually says it's third way. And the UN talks about that back in the 1980s. So I do think that's what it is. But I can, before I give you this quote, let me see if I can find this part right here, because pull this up under our mission. Yeah, I'll start with that. So our mission, post-sustainability, the condition of environmental, political, social, and economic systems after the imposition of communitarianism. The Post-Sustainability Institute, which is where I'm reading this from, was established to study the impacts that the United Nations Agenda 21 Sustainable Development and communitarianism have on liberty. Not a good one, in my opinion. Our intent is to track the progression of the sustainability movement and to forecast the most likely outcomes if it proceeds unchecked. We are a nonpartisan, non-governmental think tank based in the United States. It is our intention to provide a clearinghouse for information on the United Nations alliances with non-governmental and governmental groups seeking to erect communitarianism as the dominant form of world governance, and to serve as a rallying point for those who oppose the dismantling of liberty. We welcome your participation and assistance. And I think there was a part where they talked about how this is essentially, this was essentially the compassionate conservatism. I have it right here. Gained political traction in the 1990s, influencing third wave policies under leaders like Tony Blair and Bill Clinton in the US, who promoted stakeholder societies, balancing rights with responsibility, and George Bush's compassionate conservatism. This is very much what communitarianism is all about. And then I'll read this one part where she talks about third way. So she says that communitarianism is the balancing of individual rights against those of the community. In the U.S. Constitution, we are guaranteed rights that we were born with: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Right? This is codified in the Declaration of Independence. That we were endowed with these inalienable rights from our Creator. The last one, as you know, was to be property. Property is not just land. You are your own property. That was an element of fundamental freedom in the original draft of the Declaration of Independence. So how can you balance those rights with those of the community? The community has no rights under the Constitution. Individuals have rights and responsibilities, but the community as a whole, what is that? The collective. Whatever you balance or subsume or subordinate or consensusize the individual's rights, you'll get something different than what we are guaranteed under the Constitution. And then she gives this example. Let's take two glasses and set them on the table. One's full of water. Let's call it the Republic. The other is a glass full of milk. Let's call it the communitarian state. Now we'll get a pitcher and set it on the table. And let's balance the water with the milk, pouring them both in the pitcher. What do you have? It's not water anymore, is it? Is it milk? Watery milk? But milk, not water. It's the third way. And then they go on. But I think this is a really important point, because this is where everything is converging, is this concept of communitarianism. But you have to phoenix the Republic. And all of these movements actually talk about the dissolution of geographical nation states. And that is where I see the convergence. And that's why in my article, I say that the convergence really comes through these network states. So they have different terms for it. I had done another article. It was called the path to mass scale surveillance. And the path to mass surveillance and technological singularity. And it's how community planning visions could shape an AI-driven future. And really what I was trying to outline this is a pretty short article for those who are interested. I was trying to outline all these different 15-minute cities, but they go by so many different names, right? They're always rebranding and giving, I liken it to, if you're looking at a buffet of ice cream flavors, and they're all kind of synthetic, right? It's a simulacra. None of them are made with the good stuff like milk, cream, sugar, like real organic products, right? It's mostly just chemicals, and it's all different flavors of poison, but they've got so many flavors for you. If you like chocolate, vanilla, strawberry, orange dream, whatever pick your poison. And that's kind of what they do. They have all these different names and different flavors. So they can market it to different audiences. And with this one, you're seeing things like the 15-minute cities, which a lot of more conservative or freedom-minded people, I would say around the world, are not so fond of. But then they've got the C40 cities, and the C40 cities are the same thing, but they're just catered to those who feel we're facing an environmental crisis and we need to, adopt green policies. And that's the C40 cities, and they're the AI World Society outlines how they're connected through these nodes. And of course, the central node for the AI World Society is going to be Ukraine. That's why they talk about, again, here's the Phoenix imagery. We have to, they tore it down through the war and it's been decimated. Now we have to build it back better. And so that's why we have to pour all this money and resources into rebuilding Ukraine. They've done so many symposiums on this. You can find this on the AI World Society. I think it's aiws.net. And they talk about that. So again, you get this like Phoenix imagery, right? Of we tear it down, burn it down so we can build back better. But that's the C40 cities. But then we have here in America, Trump's talking about his freedom city. That sounds great. Who doesn't want a freedom city? I mean, I want to live in a freedom city, but it's the same thing. It's exactly the same thing. We've got the Civium, which is Jordan Hall, Game B plan. And he actually did a whole speech on it. He did two at the Startup Societies Foundation in Prospera, Peter Thiel's Prospera in Honduras, which is the Bitcoin cities. And the first one he did was about 4 years ago, and it was about Game B network states. And then he did one recently. And the one he did recently, we'll get to this in a minute. We'll get to this a little bit later on, but it was very concerning to me. So Jordan Hall has converted to Christianity about a year ago. And I always like to give people the benefit of the doubt. And obviously, people's worldviews and belief systems is not my business and certainly not my place to judge. But what I am seeing is this trend to use Christianity as a veneer. And this is where the TheoBros come in. And I talk about them in my article too. And the problem I have with the TheoBros is they do what neither Game B or the Dark Enlightenment can, which is provide this kind of divine mandate to make it seem like it's what they're doing is fulfilling God's will. And so it brings in this component of, well, how can you argue with that? This is, divinely ordained. And so, of course, it gives them this moral justification to impose their will upon everyone. And that is what they want to do. They want dominionism. So this is very different than saying I want Christian values and I'm going to instill that through my community, whether it be my family, my children, and those around me. I'm going to lead by example. That's not what they're saying. They're saying they want to replace the Constitution with biblical law. They want to replace our Bill of Rights with the Ten Commandments. I don't have a problem with the Ten Commandments, but we are not a theocracy. And this is very concerning to me that they're trying to impose a theocracy and theocratic principles, which require, again, a phoenixing of the Republic in order to do so, because it is in complete contradiction to the First Amendment. Then what other kind of overview concepts I can give you to make sure we cover everything that's really pressing before I move on is one of the buzzwords with all of these things is decentralization. And decentralization sounds great, especially to a lot of libertarian-minded people, although this is definitely a topic for another day. But the philosophical roots of libertarianism, I don't think a lot of people who subscribe to libertarianism really understand the philosophical roots of it, but it really is rooted in constructivism. It's kind of your, in many ways, self-apotheosis, right? You're the self-governor, the ruler. So it's not constructed or it's not rooted. It is constructed. It's not rooted in a natural order, a natural law. But that aside, I wrote an article on the Kantian roots of libertarianism and how Kant's philosophy birthed libertarianism and gave way to this anti-realist movement, which is very much what it is. That doesn't mean that I reject every component of libertarianism, but what I am seeing with all of these movements is, again, this third way. So to appeal to a wider audience, they use this blanket of libertarianism. People like Peter Thiel claim to be libertarian, although even despite my own issues with libertarianism, I don't think he is even actually a libertarian. He's just using the banner for marketing purposes. And one of the catchwords that they use is decentralization. And so I encourage people to really look into what they mean by decentralization. And in order to do that, I will actually read this quote. And at the end, he actually ends with a phoenix reference once again. So this is from H.G. Wells' World Brain. It says a world brain operating by an enhanced educational system through the whole body of mankind will replace our multitude of uncoordinated ganglia, our powerless miscellany of universities, research institutions, literatures with a purpose, national education systems, and the like. In that alone, it is maintained. Is there any clear hope of a really competent receiver for world affairs? Any hope of an adequate directive control of the present destructive drift of world affairs? We do not want dictators. We do not want oligarchical parties or class rule. We want a widespread world intelligence conscious of itself to work out a way to that world brain organization is therefore our primary need in this age of imperative construction. It is an immense undertaking, but not an impossible undertaking. There are favorable conditions for it, encouraging precedents and plainly evident need. And then he says that, he goes on to say, the world is a phoenix. It perishes in flames, and even as it dies, it is born again. This synthesis of knowledge is a necessary beginning to a new world. So the synthesis of the phoenix is Hegelian synthesis, right? This is using the polarities to forge the synthesis. Same thing with third way. It's also all about synthesis. That's the radical center. And this theme keeps coming up. We've got Balaji Srinivasan, who created these networks, this concept of a network state. And he very explicitly says that the goal of the network state is to create a dissolution of geographical nation states in favor of ideological cyber networks. And a lot of this concept for the network state was derived from Peter Thiel's seasteading project. Peter Thiel had a project called Seasteading where he put, I believe, $1.7 million into this concept. And it's very reminiscent, by the way, of Ghislaine Maxwell's Terramar. I don't know if he was inspired by it, but it was Terramar was a similar kind of like project on international waters. But Peter Thiel had this idea of seasteading where you would build these communities on international waters, so they're impervious to national laws, right? That's the whole purpose of it. And it wasn't very successful. So Balaji Srinivasan adopted this into network states, and he has a chapter in his book, Network States, on seasteading, and he talks about how it inspired this concept. And in it, where I'm going with this is that people keep talking about decentralization. And he has a whole chapter where he talks about decentralization towards a re-centralized center. So the whole purpose of these the decentralization of these networks is to create a centralized node, right? It's very similar to the world brain, the noosphere concept. And Game B talks about collective intelligence. That's their word. But it's all the same kind of concept. And so I keep hearing this as like, but it's decentralized. And I think it's the purpose of using that word is to appeal to the more libertarian free market audience. But even he himself in his book literally says it's towards a re-centralized center. So this is not, back in H.G. Wells' time, he was saying that the decentralization of the information institutions, right, the academic institutions, the media institution, would be the conduit to the world brain. What are the information institutions today? That would be the internet. That would be these various social media platforms, these news outlets, quote unquote. The information institution is really the internet. So they're trying to create the world brain through the internet, which is very reminiscent of the concept of the noosphere, which was very influential in Game B. Teilhard de Chardin was an intellectual mentor to Barbara Marx Hubbard. Barbara Marx Hubbard was a direct mentor to many of the Game B proponents. So people like Daniel Schmachtenberger, and I won't go too much into this because I think we covered quite a bit the last time. But Daniel Schmachtenberger is partners with Jordan Hall, his brother James Schmachtenberger. They have a company it's now called Qualia Life. It used to be called Neurohacker. I just find it fascinating. These things are always rebranding, coming up with new names like Prospera, Peter Thiel's Prospera, the subsidiary is called Infinita, but it used to be called Vitalia. You can still find Vitalia on the Wayback Machine, and the first thing that will pop up is they say a city where death is optional. So it's all about life extension and kind of transhuman adjacent type of things. But this qualia life is also, I would say, transhuman adjacent, but they couch it in that it's wellness and neurological life extension kind of terms. But so they're all partners in this. And when you look through the website, I mean, it's like, then there's just so many people on that board, and you'll recognize like 95% of them. So, so we have, so I was seeing this converge, this dialectic between game B, dark enlightenment, and the overlap between the two of them is these network states, and they call them different things. So, the network state concept seems to be an overlap for both of them. Of course, the Sob Corp or the Gov Corp is not termed network state, but it's the same thing. It's this idea that you're going to have these ideological network city states, right? It's not geographical city states. And they talk about how we need to get past, Nick Land, who was kind of forerunner of a concept called accelerationism. And Nick Land's a very, very strange character. He's very interesting. I probably shouldn't be strange. Might sound pejorative. That's for you to decide. I find him kind of strange, but he's got. I have a link actually to one of his. Like it's on the Wayback Machine. I don't know if I can go back and find it in the article, but I do have a link to it where it's because his old website was called Xenosystems, but this is actually xenosystems.demon .uk, but it's all about like occult xenosystems. He was very inspired by occultism, like Lovecraft and Evola, and he had this concept of deterritorialism, and he adopted this from Deleuze, and but it was this idea of basically that we're not going to be attached to our geographical location anymore. So it's going to be up in the cloud, these communities. And of course, that's the Dark Enlightenment adopts that too. Yeah, let me see if I can find that section. So I'm not just talking from memory, since it is not as strong today. Okay, yeah, so let's see. So accelerationism, the concept of accelerationism is that so I had talked about Yanis Varoufakis, if I said that correctly. But he talks about how he says capitalism is already dead. It's already done. We're past that. We're now in the techno-feudal stage. But Nick Land, Nick Land came out of he was involved in something called the CCRU, which is the Cybernetic Culture Research Unit. It was at Warwick University in their philosophy department. He was a forerunner of this, along with Sadie Plant, who was a cyberpunk feminist. And he coined this concept of accelerationism, which was this idea that he was not a fan of capitalism at all. He saw this as like capitalism as like an alien force projected onto humanity. But he thought that we needed to use capitalism and push it to its nth degree, like push it until it collapsed as fast as possible. And he thought that the way to do that was through technology. We were going to advance capitalism very, very rapidly so that we would reach like an apocalyptic stage in which we could have this kind of technocratic takeover where we would achieve these gov corps, and it would be technoplastic beings, he calls them, which are essentially, I've talked about this quite a bit on several of my shows, and it sounds like dystopian science fiction, but they are doing these SynCon types of like biosynthetic conferences all over the world. They have them every year. There are thousands of universities all over the world who are training people in this field. And it's really the merger. And Obama had you can find it on the Obama White House archives. where he talks about this is what they're reviving in the Maha movement. This is what I was trying to warn people about. I love the message of Maha. Who could argue with "Make America Healthy Again," right? But they're very clever at marketing. I always say we all need their marketing teams, right? If I could find out who does marketing for the UN, I'd probably be a very successful person if I could get them on my team. But the concept of Maha sounds great, but what they're really trying to push in is this AI precision medicine. And this was something Obama was working on. This part of the Brain Initiative. And it is all about synthetic biology and merging, creating technoplastic beings, which is what Nick Land called it. But it's really this transhuman agenda. And there are universities all over the world, like thousands of them, who are studying this, training people in it, also training them in nanotechnology, so like the Internet of Nanobio things. And I'll read this quote that I have in my article from Nick Land. So there are two separate quotes, and you do have to go to the way back to get them. But he says the formalization of political powers, thirdly, allows for the possibility of effective government. Once the universe of democratic corruption is converted into a freely transferable shareholding in GovCorp, the owners of the state can initiate rational corporate governance, beginning with the appointment of a CEO, right? Curtis Yarvin talks about this also, how this is why he was very supportive of Trump, and he wanted Trump to come in and be a CEO, with his business background, and implement RAGE, which is retire all government employees. There's actually a speech of Curtis Yarvin back in 2012 where he talks about the reboot of the government, and part of the reboot is to retire all government employees. And in doing this, they say that this was very influential on Doge. But even Nick Land wasn't pleased with how he did it. He said it was like equivalent to a bunch of chimpanzees trying to orchestrate Wagner. So he wasn't too impressed with how it was implemented, but it was that inspired that concept. And so I'm all for getting rid of bloated bureaucracy. Don't get me wrong. I love the transparency of overspending and, let the people know where their money was going and what a waste it was. But I am not in favor of replacing all government employees with technocracy, which is what retire all government employees is about. So decreasing the government employees, that might not be such a bad thing, but when they're talking about replacing it with AI, that's where I have a bit of a concern. So sorry for the interruption. I'll go back to reading this. So as with any business, the interests of the state are now precisely formalized and maximization of long-term shareholder value. There's no longer any need for residents, clients, to take any interest in politics whatsoever. Right? Just like the AI World Society says, we're going to replace all human governance. It's going to be all AI. And in the United States currently, almost every state has a digital governance summit. Where they meet to talk about digital. And there was also AI.gov, which actually started all the way back in 2019. And it's still right now redirects to White House .gov, but they are trying to launch this AI.gov. So there's no longer any need for resident clients to take any interest in politics whatsoever. In fact, to do so would be to exhibit semi-criminal proclivities. If GovCorp doesn't deliver acceptable value for its taxes, sovereign rent, they can notify its customer service function, and if necessary, take their custom elsewhere. So I just want to address that because a lot of the pushback I've gotten when I talk about things like network states or, Curtis Yarvin, Nick Land's ideas, what people tell me is, oh, it's totally voluntary, right? You can enter whichever one you like. So that Game B says this too. Whoa, if you want your carnivore proto B, if you want your libertarian proto B, or you want to be in a communist proto, whatever it is, pick your flavor that you can choose. However, what people don't seem to recognize is that once smart contracts are in place, like good luck exiting that or good luck revising that. Like, how do you negotiate with a smart contract? So they do say, oh, you can just, take your business elsewhere and go to another nation state, which is these network states, GovCorps, would concentrate upon running efficient, attractive, vital, clean, and secure country of a kind that is able to draw customers. no voice, and free exit. And of course, that's a concept from Albert O. Hirschman's Exit, Voice, and Loyalty. And then this is from another one of his articles. He says, ones and had modeled their tough plasticity into various useful temporary limbs and organs, but now their self-modeling powers were sometimes exercised independently and in various imitative forms implanted by past suggestion. They had, it seems, developed into a semi-stable brain whose separate and occasionally stubborn volition echo the will of the old ones without always obeying it. The ideas of a robot rebellion or capital insurgency are crude precursors to the realization of Shaggoth, convinced as is intrinsically abstract technoplastic, bionically auto-processing matter, of the kind that Lovecraft envisages in intersecting with terrestrial geophysics, in the distant past, scarring it cryptically. Shaggoth is a virtual plasma state of material capability that logically includes within itself all natural beings. It builds brains as technical self-functions. Whatever brains can think, Shaggoth can process as an arbitrary specification of protoplasmic or perhaps hyperplasmic abstraction. Formless protoplasm able to mock and reflect all forms and organs of processes, viscous alginations of bubbling cells, rubbery 15-foot spheroids, infinitely plastic, ductile slaves of suggestion, builders of cities, more and more sullen, more and more intelligent, more and more amphibious, more and more imitative. Great God, what madness made even those blasphemous old ones willing to use and crave such things. The history of capitalism is indubitably a horror story. And that is from Xenosystems Fragments by Nick Land. So yeah, he has this idea of technoplastic beings, this very transhuman vision, and that is where we're going towards a post-human type of world. Yeah, his essays Meltdown and Fanged Nomina crystallize those ideas, and yeah, look into the cybernetic culture research unit. So, and then there was this idea, which I don't have in this article from Nick Land, but I know I had posted it. I posted it on a bunch of my channels. I posted it on Substack. I posted it on my Twitter and Telegram. I'll see if I can find it. But it was where Nick Land essentially talks about how, sorry, not Nick Land, Curtis Yarvin talks about how we should, how the most humane alternative to genocide is to virtualize humans. So that I don't remember how the rest of the quote goes, but that's essentially what he says. So this transhuman vision is kind of pervasive in all of them. But the thesis was that they're using right now, this is very much involved in the Trump administration. There are a lot of these technocrats who subscribe to the Dark Enlightenment are, influencing people either in the administration or, adjacent to it. And a lot of the policies that we're seeing today, it's very top-down, autocratic, overtly technocratic. And then we've got on the other side this kind of soft power influence that is more spiritual, more UN, theosophical, game B, and through covering all of them, we have these network state concepts. And another concept I will bring up related to this is this idea of subsidiarity. And those of you who are following the UN language, they talk about subsidiarity a lot. Now, subsidiarity is a concept that comes originally from Catholic school teaching. And the concept, the connotation was this very like hyper locality. So this idea that we would have, we would only go to higher up for like consultation, essentially to help the most local and the individual. And they've kind of inverted it in typical fashion. They've inverted this concept to now mean it's all about managerial. So it is really all about centralization at the highest level. And this is another one of their buzzwords, but I see this as kind of a blanket theme throughout all of these decentralized type of network states, whether you call them civium projects or you call them GovCorps or SovCorps or actual network states. And then the component that I had mentioned towards the end was these TheoBros. So let me find the TheoBros. And let's see, so the TheoBros. And the TheoBros, as I had briefly mentioned, this idea that you have people who want to establish dominionism. And actually, I have a really short video. I think it's like, I don't know how many minutes. If it's only a few minutes, could I play that? That kind of sums them up. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, there are Christian nationalist influencers. Let me introduce you to the TheoBros.
We can't force people to have faith in Christ, but we can, as a people, order that.
I'd rather have a Christian monarchy than our current state of affair.
We could argue that now is the time to arms again.
So the TheoBros are a group of mostly millennial Christian pastors and influencers. Many of them, most of them even, will tell you that they are Christian nationalists.
We are indeed Christian nationalists.
They're purposefully extreme and extremely online, so they're obviously connected to J.D. Vance.
There's this group called the Rockbridge Network. J.D. Vance was a founder. Peter Thiel is involved, and also this guy Chris Buskirk.
And then, of course, Chris Buskirk, a great friend of mine,
who was involved in American Reformer, which is kind of the unofficial magazine of the TheoBros. I think it's important to say that not all of them hold every belief. That being said, I think some common beliefs that I have encountered are that we should be repealing the 19th Amendment. They'll talk about the dead Constitution and how the 10 Commandments should take its place.
I want a Christian nation more than a republic.
I think all 10 commandments should be legislated and enforced.
Some of them talk about prison reform, and by prison reform, they mean public flogging instead of prison. Some of them talk about executing heretics. Involved in that is also execution of gay people.
But it's not just online. They're doing conferences, writing books, doing events.
One of the things that's been interesting lately is that some of their events have started to overlap with some events of more kind of mainstream politicians. And I think probably the most prominent example was the National Conservatism Conference, where you had Doug Wilson speaking at this conference.
And of course, coming to the high treachery, you were all no doubt anticipating I would address, make all our teens woke by means of chemtrails.
And you had J.D. Vance speaking there.
America is a nation. It is a group of people with a common history and a common future.
Now, if TheoBros are kind of the millennial posters of the Christian nationalist movement, Doug Wilson is sort of like the boomer who passed the torch.
He has sort of built his own little Christian fiefdom in Moscow, Idaho. He has this church. He has, helped to start a school, like a K through 12 school there. He has a college there, New St. Andrews College, that he's helped to found as well.
Now, it's this community in Idaho that he's built that TheoBros see as sort of a blueprint for what a Christian America could and should look like.
Creating a legal framework in which people could create intentional communities where they could build something new would be a good idea to allow people to experiment. Just
like Doug Wilson, so too do many of the other TheoBros want to do this in various places in the United States.
But he's also built this other type of blueprint for Christian nationalist influencing.
He was telling me about how he has his kids helping him produce these very slick videos.
The left is the cancer and Trump is the chemo.
He's taking some of these ideas. He's really making them for a broader audience and for a younger audience.
Now, at this point, you might ask, where are all the women?
If you asked some of these guys where the women were, they would say they're at home, like taking care of the kids.
Godly women want to feed their men. Godly women are designed to make the sandwiches. When women were granted the right to vote, we were so muddled, we thought we were giving the franchise to women when we were in fact taking it away from families.
And just for the record, I think the 19th Amendment should be repealed. I think that because, well, first and foremost, because I'm a Christian. If we had a Christian nation and women could vote, then within 50 years, we would no longer have a Christian nation.
They don't think that women should be in leadership roles. They don't think that women should be out there voicing their opinions.
As we already know, Vance holds very particular views on gender.
If you bought into an idea that it's liberating to leave an 8-week-old baby to go work 90 hours a week at Goldman Sachs, you've been had. You have women who think that truly the liberationist path is to spend 90 hours a week working in a cubicle at McKinsey instead of starting a family and having children. To me, what it is sort of a value system to replace the fact that they're all fundamentally atheist or agnostic. The people who are most deranged and most psychotic are people who don't have kids.
It's clear that they see J.D. Vance as someone who will help further their vision of a country that puts Christianity above all else.
I think these guys saw one of their collaborators in the White House. It would be proof to them that all of the effort that they have made, all of the time and money that has been invested, that it was all paying off.
There's so much more to this story, including connections to Project 2025, more about the web of J.D. Vance and TheoBros that I can't even dream of touching on in a video like this. So go read Kira Butler's full piece at motherjones.com.
So yeah, I think I saw him popped up. Some people were critical of the source of Mother Jones. It's definitely not. I don't necessarily agree with all of their work, but I think they did a good job compiling this, and those quotes are directly from those guys. So, yeah. Did you want to say something, or? Well,
Oh no, you can go ahead and
okay.
I mean,
Okay.
yeah, just go ahead and yeah.
Okay. So he wasn't in this video, but it's also worth noting that Augustus Dorico, known as the Rainmaker, likely, he was working on that cloud seeding technology right before those floods in Texas. There was a video, I don't have it, but where he pretty much does admit that that was causal. But you guys can, search for that yourself. It's an interesting coincidence. But he's involved in what's called American Dynamism, that movement, and that's actually funded by Andreessen Lux. And I'll pull that up, but let's see if I can find the website, American Dynamism, investing in the future of aerospace. What we believe, the American Dynamism practice invests in founders and companies that support the national interests of aerospace defense, public safety, education, housing, supply chains, industrial, and manufacturing. We believe that the mission-driven and civic-minded founders often build companies that transcend verticals and business models in their quest to solve important national problems. These companies view the government as the customer, competitor, or key stakeholder, and the successes of these companies supports the flourishing of all Americans. Dynamic companies exist in all 50 states and have global impact. They say the movement embodies the spirit of innovation, progress, resilience that drives the United States forward. This powerful force is exemplified by groundbreaking achievements in technology and innovation, shaping our nation and global landscape. It reflects the American commitment to pushing boundaries, embracing challenges, and always striving for a brighter, more prosperous future. Investing in visionary founders and teams tackling the world's most pressing problems is essential to fusing this dynamic spirit and ensuring continued progress for generations to come. And then they give kind of like this outline of the Wright brothers taking flight, the Manhattan Project, the invention of the transistor, the moon landing, microprocessors, internet is born, modern lithium ion is invented, and then the iPhone is announced in 2007. SpaceX lands the first rocket stage, and then 2022 generative AI goes mainstream. And then I had a video on Prospera. So I don't have this video because it's too long, but I do recommend people checking it out because it's what is it called? The Inside the Illegal Billionaire Paradise with its own laws. And this is what I wanted to point out with all these 15-minute cities, with network states. This is really about deregulation that allows for these tech elite who would have the ability you'd have to be able to buy this, right? Like I couldn't buy a Prospera Bitcoin city, right? But Peter Thiel can do that. And they don't have laws. They're not subject. They make their own laws. So they're not, that's why the concept of seasteading was going to be on international waters, because they're not subject to national laws. And in that they're doing these experiments. I don't know if we do, I think we have a short video on it. So I can play it, but there's one part in this video where I don't have it in here, but they actually have this technology to create like trips as if you were doing psychedelics, so that you would have this transcendent experience. They're doing all these transhuman type of experiments. But yeah, maybe I think this video is like a minute, just a short clip on Prospera.
Government's trying to shut all of this down. Trying to claim that it's illegal, shutting it down without a warrant.
Off the coast of Honduras, hidden in plain sight, is a city unlike any around it. One with its own laws and an unusual amount of autonomy. A private city unlike anywhere else on Earth, created by Silicon Valley minds and backed by wealthy investors who believe that governments don't work, so they made their own.
Welcome to Prospera, a beacon of freedom and prosperity for all.
Prospera. At first, it was created with full support from the Honduran government. But since then, the government has changed, and the new administration has continuously tried to repeal the law and shut the city down. To critics, this isn't the future. It's a modern form of colonialism. The people are divided, and the truth, well, it's complicated. The confusing part is that it's still there, still operating, and still expanding. So we came, this one-of-a-kind city on Earth, to ask one question. Is this the future of human progress, or a dangerous experiment gone too far?
Yeah, so I think that's a common theme with this whole network state concept. Is it's the tech elites like it because they're not subject to the laws of nation states, and they can kind of do whatever they want. But one of the other concepts that I wanted to point out is tokenization, and I'm very concerned about this because I think this is where everything is heading. And all of these movements, the Game B, network states, the TheoBros, and the Dark Enlightenment are all supportive of this concept of a tokenized society. So one of the first ways that they're supporting it, and we're seeing this with this third wave politics as well. So my article on the technological age of Aquarius covers it in a little bit more detail, but I cover it in this article as well. This idea of all of these movements that are emerging through these post-partisan political, these independent movements, where they talk about things like liquid democracy is Jim Rutt's from Game B's concept. There's Barbara Marx Hubbard's concept of synergistic democracy. There's ranked choice voting. A lot of people may be familiar with that. Quadratic voting, conviction voting. They have all sorts of names, and some of them have nuanced differences under their umbrella. But essentially, this is about using blockchain for voting, and it's again under the banner that it is, the ultimate democracy, that it's direct participatory democracy, which it's not. Liquid democracy, they say, is a hybrid formula. But firstly, I will say that we would have to phoenix the republic to become a democracy. And as I outlined in my article, I think that America is a primary target. Because they want to create the technate. But, of course, they want to capture the West, and they want to capture the world. They all talk about the scalability, the global scalability, whether it's Jordan Hall and Game B talking about it, or whether it's Curtis Yarvin. I mean, they're all talking about this, obviously, network states anywhere in the world. So the scalability is very important to them. But I do think they're very much targeting America. And so this is selling us this idea of democracy, which is really a revolution to transform the United States out of a constitutional republic. And they want to use blockchain technology to do it. And then the other concept is this tokenizing the economy. And we're seeing this at what feels like lightning speed. So here in the United States, they have Trump did do his executive order where he banned central bank digital currencies, which is great. I'm supportive of that. However, I think it was a little bit of a red herring because I don't think central bank digital currencies were ever going to sell in the United States. So now he's supporting things like stable coins and other modalities of digital currency, and talking about maybe making Bitcoin a reserve currency. And I think that kind of goes against everything that people who are Bitcoin enthusiasts support. But he's also they're proposing the Stable Act, the Genius Act, the Clarity Act, which is all surrounding digital currency. And I think where they're going with this, and all of these movements are talk about tokenization, and they support tokenization because they say we can have fractal ownership of things. And the kind of, again, not so funny joke I make about that is that you would think you could share assets with family members, but there's a reason estate lawyers exist. It doesn't always quite work out that way. So I'm not sure how it's going to work out in communitarianism with a bunch of strangers. But this is the idea. And what's really horrifying about it is that when you start talking about the whole purpose of technocracy is, I mean, according to Technocrat magazine, I have that quote too in one of them, is social engineering. They say that in their 1937 magazine, volume 3, number 4, September 1937. And they say that the technocracy is the science of social engineering. So, yeah, I think you scroll down a little bit, it's on there. But they talk about that. And so it's social engineering, and they also... it's in their, their study guide on technocracy, but they talk about how the whole purpose of data collection is control, right? That's what the surveillance is for, is that feedback loop. It is control. And so when they're able to collect all this information on us, and now layer on top of that, put on your Black Mirror viewing glasses, and they're able to use the Internet of Nanobio things and 6G technology. Now with tokenization, they would have control over us that I think is unfathomable to people. That's a tyranny like no other. This would really be like the vision of technocracy coming to complete fruition. And all of them talk about it. They all talk about it in slightly, and I lay it out with each movement and how they support tokenization, but they all talk about things like DAOs, the decentralized autonomous organizations. There's the network state where they have things like Praxis, which is in Greenland. Greenland's pretty interesting, right? Because that's part of the technate, and it's part of that concept that wasn't Trump talking about acquiring Greenland. And I just think it's funny that the name is Praxis, right? That Marxist concept of political activism, that's what they're naming their $525 million crypto city project. They envision tokens as the currency of citizenship, where individuals buy into the state rules as and so that's their concept of Praxis. They call it network archipelagos, using blockchain to enforce contracts to manage resources. So Peter Thiel also invested in Curtis Yarvin's Urbit, which is also a tokenized identity platform, and he did that through Pronimos Capital. So then Dark Enlightenment, of course, we just talked about Urbit concept. So that's using AI and blockchain to enable control. Then let's see, what other ones did I point out? Game B had their liquid democracy concept, the DAOs, and I think I put a link to the Game B DAO, or maybe I don't have it in here. But they have an actual Game B city, which is a decentralized or autonomous organization. So tokenization is, I think, a huge concern that we need to be really aware of and push back, and it's kind of pervasive along all of these movements. So I guess we'll just wrap it up and open up for questions. But I kind of see this as they have to tear everything down in order to rebuild this movement towards a techno-feudal system. They're using Hegelian dialectics, so they'll give you the different types, the different varieties. They claim that we're in this meta crisis. That's the language of Game B. For the Dark Enlightenment, of course, it's just, the apocalyptic state of capitalism that's a pending doom. So we need to have Sov Corps and Gov Corps to replace it. And the network state has a similar concept of that too. And the TheoBros align with all of that, only they use divine mandate as their justification to impose moral will and their law on everybody else using dominionism. So
that was intense, Courtney. That was a very intense ride. Thank you very much for going through that. And of course, just to reemphasize, Courtney's Phoenix Conspiracy essay is going to be in the description box under this video when it goes online. So people should just take some time, take a notebook out, check that out, rewatch this class, take more notes. And I think that what's so valuable is when you get the sense of the simple formula, like there's this intimidation that turns off many people's minds from going the distance and doing the lifting that your mind did and that you've encouraged all of us here to do mentally, because we're told it's so complex the mind can't understand it, so don't bother. And that veneer of complexity really serves to safeguard the actual oligarchy from having the nasty, troublesome thoughts of human beings that they want to victimize penetrate through their invisible force field. But in reality, when you take this approach you've taken, and that I think we're all trying to adopt, is that there are simple formulas to screwing up humanity. There is a method to it. There are these controlled dialectics. You pointed out the feminine path and the masculine path of this occult working, of the penetration of the TheoBros and their authoritarian kind of tendency, with at the same time as you have sort of this feminine. I don't believe that these are actual feminine, masculine expressions. However, that's how the empire thinks about it. Yeah. Of the embrace of using sentimentality, feelings, and absorb through something more Fabian, more Chardin-like, more this Eros school.
Mystery schools, Gaffney.
Gaffney's Eros mystery schools. So yeah, super useful to keep that all in mind. I've got some questions, but I'm going to defer to Monty first, and I want everybody to think about any questions or thoughts they want to share or toss at you right now. So Monty, you're the first in there, so go.